there's so much worship to Corbusier. And, I told my students that when I was in undergrad, there was a lot of discussion about Mies. There was some discussion about Frank Lloyd Wright. And in graduate school, in the postgraduate work, it was all about Corb. And and Frank Lloyd Wright was almost a footnote to all of that. And it seemed like, and part of it was because the East Coast schools, the Cornell School of Thought about architecture and design, which really started at the University of Texas, migrated up to Cornell, was all about the intellectual thought with regard to architecture. And Frank Lloyd Wright was a producer of work. He was not a writer about work. He was not a theorist about work or a theorist about architecture. He was he produced work, and he deigned to even write about a lot of his work. And yet Corbusier at 25, wrote a treatise about architecture that rivals, in some people's opinions, that of Alberti, that of Loger, and even that of Vitruvius. That if you mark in time those great treatises of architecture, you talk about De Architectura, you talk about the 10 books of architecture, you talk about Loger, and then you talk about Corb, the architecture of tomorrow. So, in framing it in those terms, Frank Lloyd Wright is truly a footnote in all of that, but he wasn't. And I think people in architecture schools, they forget how much impact he had on society, and perhaps in his early years, yes, he was doing a lot of residential architecture in Oak Park, outside of Chicago. Brilliant, wonderful residences, but he hadn't contributed to public buildings very much. And I really like how he evolved during the course of this book into truly an architectural powerhouse.
He was also one that was more of the artist and the sculptor than the hardcore rational intellectual type. And in that, you're gonna get some follies, you're gonna get some things that, yeah, that wall could have been thinner or XYZ. And so in school, the very first semester, it is a drawing class, and we are doing a plan section, elevation, overlay, and a perspective in a very artistic way. It's not like it's supposed to be the scale, but it's not like it's a very, very clean one plan drawing. And someone did Fall in Water, and the only comment the professor really had was, "Don't do Fall in Water."
Wow.
Right, is overblown or overplayed, and that is the mantra. And yeah, part of it is because of the writings, because as a professor for you and also a student, like how many of the readings are by other architects? That's almost like exclusively what the handouts are. It's small articles or like smaller treatises types or whatnot. And I do feel that Frank Lloyd Wright was thinking in spatial terms, but as far as that modernist ideal of really designing through structure and materials, I didn't feel reveal the structure as much. He was more almost the opposite, like kind of hiding it, because especially Fall in Water, it's like, how is it even standing? And it's also cracking, but it's still that it's a lot more hidden versus, say, if Beast executed the same sort of plan, you would have had gigantic exposed I-beams on and on, versus the more organic type field that Prince would quite wanted, and a building being of the earth, and versus being extremely luxurious. And yeah, in school, I don't recall once looking at a Frank Lloyd Wright precedent.
So